My name is Riley Carter, and I'm a park ranger for Alaska State Parks. I've been doing this job for 3 years now, mostly summer rotations in the easier sectors, Denali Trail maintenance, Kenai campground patrols, the kind of work where you deal with tourists asking where the bathroom is and reminding them not to feed the moose. But this winter, I finally got what I'd been asking for, a solo fire tower assignment. Tower 17, they call it. Deep in the Tongass National Forest, about 40 miles from the nearest logging road and 100 miles from anything resembling civilization. The Tongass is the largest temperate rainforest in the world, stretching across southeast Alaska like a blanket of green in the summer. But in winter it transforms into something else entirely. The spruce and hemlock trees become black sentinels against endless white. The forest floor disappears under 6 feet of snow. The temperature drops to 30, sometimes 40 below zero. And the silence. The silence is absolute, broken only by the crack of freezing wood and the occasional howl of wind through the valleys. I grew up in Anchorage, so I'm no stranger to the cold or the isolation. My dad was a bush pilot, and my mom worked for Fish and Game. They taught me early that Alaska doesn't forgive mistakes. Respect the wilderness, they'd say, and it'll respect you back. I thought I understood what that meant until I arrived at Tower 17. The tower itself is a relic from the 1960s, built back when the Forest Service was paranoid about wildfires spreading through the timber industry's cash crop. It's 100 feet of rust-red steel bolted directly into a granite outcrop, with a small observation cabin at the top. The cabin is maybe 10 feet by 10 feet, just enough room for a cot, a propane heater, a chemical toilet, a desk with logbooks and a radar console, and a kitchen area that consists of a hot plate and a mini-fridge that runs off a solar panel array. There are windows on all 4 sides, giving you a 360-degree view of the forest canopy, stretching to the horizon. The door is the cabin's most notable feature. It's solid steel, painted the same rust red as the tower legs, with 3 deadbolts and a small reinforced window at eye level. Outside the door is a metal grating catwalk that circles the entire cabin, with a spiral staircase leading down to the forest floor. There's supposed to be a floodlight mounted above the door, but it burned out sometime before I arrived, and the replacement bulb won't come until the next supply drop. I flew in on November 3rd. The chopper pilot, a grizzled guy named Hank who looked like he'd been flying in Alaska since before statehood, gave me a quick rundown during the flight. 2-week rotations, he shouted over the rotor noise. We'll do a supply drop every 14 days, weather permitting. Radio check-in every morning at 0800. Emergency channel stays open, but don't expect much range out here. You get into trouble, you're on your own until we can get a bird in the air. Understood, I shouted back. Tower 17's got a reputation, Hank added, his eyes hidden behind aviator sunglasses despite the overcast sky. Couple rangers requested transfers after short stints. Nothing official, just people don't like staying up there long. Why's that? He shrugged. Isolation gets to some folks. Long nights. You'll see. Before I could ask more, we were descending toward the clearing where Tower 17 stood like a lonely giant. Hank set us down just long enough for me to unload my gear, 2 duffel bags of clothes, a backpack of personal items, and 3 plastic totes of food and supplies. Then he was gone, the helicopter disappearing into the grey sky, and I was alone. The first week was exactly what I expected. I settled into a routine quickly. Wake at dawn, make coffee on the hot plate, do the morning radio check-in with dispatch in Juneau. Then the day's work, scanning each quadrant of the forest with binoculars, checking the radar console for any heat signatures that might indicate a fire, logging wildlife sightings. I saw plenty of those, moose moving through the valleys, a few black bears making last-minute preparations for hibernation, ravens and eagles riding the thermal currents. Once I spotted what I thought might be a wolf pack in the distance, but they were too far away to be sure. The nights were the hardest part, but not in the way Hank had implied. It wasn't the isolation that bothered me. I'd always been comfortable with my own company. It was the darkness. With the floodlight out and no moon for the first few nights, the blackness beyond the windows was total and complete. I'd stand at the window after sunset, flashlight in hand, and see nothing but my own reflection staring back at me. The forest disappeared entirely, swallowed by the night. But I adapted. I kept myself busy in the evenings, reading the paperback novels I'd brought, writing in my personal journal, playing solitaire with a worn deck of cards I found in one of the desk drawers. The propane heater kept the cabin warm enough, and the sleeping bag on the cot was rated for -40. I slept well those first nights, lulled by the creaking of the tower in the wind and the occasional crack of ice forming on the trees below. On my fourth day, during the morning radio check-in, dispatch connected me with Jenkins, the veteran ranger stationed at Tower 9 about 60 miles to the west. Jenkins had been with Alaska Parks for over 20 years, working fire towers every winter. His voice came through the radio rough and gravelly, like he'd spent half his life shouting over helicopter engines. "Carter, you settling in all right at Tower 17? He asked. "Yes, sir. No problem so far." "Good. Listen, I wanted to pass along something important. It's a rule we have for the winter towers, especially the remote ones like yours." "I'm listening." "After midnight, we never open the door before counting to 10, out loud, slowly, every single time." I waited for him to elaborate, but there was only static. "I'm sorry, could you repeat that?" "After midnight," Jenkins said, his tone more serious now, "if you hear anything at the door, knocking, scratching, voices, doesn't matter, you count to 10 out loud before you open it. 1 Mississippi, 2 Mississippi, all the way to 10, you understand?" Yes, but why? What's the reason?" "Just do it, Carter. It's an old rule. Been around longer than I have. Trust me on this one." "Is this about bears? Because I thought they'd be hibernating by now." "It's not about bears." Jenkins paused and I heard him take a breath. "Look, I'm not going to fill your head with stories. Just follow the rule. Count to 10 before you open the door after midnight. Can you do that?" "Yes, sir." "Good man. Stay safe out there." The radio clicked off, leaving me alone with the static and the wind. I sat there for a moment, staring at the radio console, trying to make sense of the conversation. Was it some kind of hazing ritual for new rangers? A tradition to mess with the rookies? But Jenkins hadn't sounded like he was joking. His voice had carried a weight that made my skin prickle. I decided to follow the rule, ridiculous as it seemed. After all, what did I have to lose? That night, night 5 of my rotation, I found out why the rule existed. I was sitting at the desk at 12:07 a.m., finishing up the midnight log entry. I'd been noting the temperature, -28 degrees, wind speed gusting to 15 knots, and the day's wildlife sightings, 2 moose at bearing 240 degrees, a raven flock to the northeast. The propane heater hissed softly in the corner, and I could hear the guy wires holding the tower steady singing in the wind. It was peaceful, almost meditative. Then came the knocking. 3 distinct raps on the steel door. Thump, thump, thump. I froze, pen hovering above the logbook. My first thought was that a branch had broken loose and hit the catwalk, but no, this was too deliberate, too rhythmic. These were knuckles on metal. My heart rate kicked up immediately. I set down the pen and grabbed the flashlight from the desk, standing slowly. The cabin suddenly felt smaller, the walls pressing in. I approached the door carefully, boots silent on the wooden floor. "Hello?" I called out, keeping my voice steady. "Is someone out there?" No answer. Just the wind and the creaking of the tower. I stepped closer to the door, peering through the small reinforced window. The flashlight beam cut through the darkness beyond, illuminating the empty catwalk and the railing beyond. Snow was falling lightly, dancing in the light. There was nothing. No person, no animal, nothing. Thump, thump, thump. The knocking came again, and this time I felt it through the door itself, lower down, maybe waist height. My breath caught in my throat. "Who's there?" I tried again, louder this time. Silence answered me. Jenkins' words came back to me then, crystal clear. After midnight, we never opened the door before counting to 10. It felt absurd. I was standing in a fire tower 100 feet above the ground, and I was supposed to count to 10 before opening the door because... Why? But something about those 3 knocks, the way they'd come from different heights, made my hands shake as I reached for the deadbolts. 1, I said aloud, my voice sounding strange in the small cabin. 2, 3, 4, 5. I paused between each number, slow and deliberate, just as Jenkins had instructed. The cabin was completely silent except for my counting and the ever-present wind. 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. I slid the 3 deadbolts back. Clunk, 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 and pulled the door open. Flashlight raised. The catwalk was empty. I stepped out into the cold, the wind immediately biting through my thermal layers. The metal grating under my boots was covered in a thin layer of fresh snow, completely undisturbed. No footprints, no marks of any kind. I swept the flashlight around the entire catwalk, checking every angle. But there was nothing, just the spiral staircase leading down into darkness, and the railing disappearing into the snowy night. I stood there for a full minute, scanning the forest below with the flashlight, but the beam couldn't penetrate far enough to see anything useful. Eventually, the cold drove me back inside. I locked all 3 deadbolts and stood with my back against the door, heart still pounding. I logged it in the official record. 007 hours, auditory anomaly at cabin door, possible wind shear causing noise on loose panel or equipment. Will inspect in daylight. But I knew it wasn't wind. Wind doesn't knock 3 times in deliberate rhythm. I didn't sleep well that night. Every creak of the tower, every gust of wind had me sitting up in my sleeping bag, flashlight in hand, staring at the door. But nothing else happened. When dawn finally came, grey light filtering through the windows, I inspected the entire catwalk and found nothing unusual. No loose panels, no equipment that could have made that knocking sound. I didn't mention it during the morning radio check-in. The next night, night 6, it happened again. I was prepared this time, sitting at the desk with the Colt .45 revolver that Alaska Parks issues to all rangers in bear country. The midnight log was finished, and I was playing solitaire, trying to keep my mind occupied. The clock on the wall read 12:07 a.m. when the knocking came. Thump, thump, thump. But this time, there was something else. A voice, muffled by the door and the wind, but definitely a voice. "Riley? Riley, let me in. It's cold out here." My blood turned to ice water in my veins. That voice. I knew that voice because it was mine. Not similar to mine, not close to mine. It was exactly my voice. Same pitch, same cadence, same slight rasp I get when I'm tired. And it knew my name. My first name, which I'd never given out during this rotation. Dispatch called me Carter. Jenkins called me Carter. The chopper pilot called me Carter. Riley was personal, something only family and close friends used. "Riley, please," the voice came again, and it sounded desperate now, almost pleading. "I'm hurt out here, let me in." I stood frozen, the playing cards scattered across the desk, forgotten. My mind raced through possibilities. Radio transmission somehow playing back my own voice. Another ranger playing a prank. But no, we were 60 miles from the nearest tower, and I was the only one assigned to this sector. Thump, thump, thump. The knocking came again, more insistent now, and I could hear something else, a dragging sound like someone pulling themselves across the metal grating. Jenkins' rule, count to 10. 1, I said aloud, and my voice cracked. I cleared my throat. 2, 3, 4. "Riley, why are you counting?" the voice outside said, and the hurt in it sounded so genuine that I almost stopped. "Just open the door, please. I'm freezing. 5, 6, 7, 8. Riley, it's you out here. Don't you recognize yourself?" That sentence made no sense, but the way it was delivered, with my exact inflection, my exact rhythm, made my skin crawl. 9, 10. I grabbed the flashlight and the revolver, then threw open the deadbolts and yanked the door open. Empty catwalk. But this time there were footprints, boot prints to be exact. Men's size 10, same as mine. The same tread pattern as my own winter boots. They led from the spiral staircase directly to the door, stopping just at the threshold. But there were no prints leading away. The snow on the catwalk beyond the door was undisturbed, except for those single set of tracks approaching. And there, on the bottom step of the spiral staircase, was a dark smear in the snow. I crouched down, shining the flashlight on it. It was viscous, partially frozen, with a metallic smell that I recognized immediately. Blood. Fresh blood, maybe an hour old at most, already crystallizing in the extreme cold. I swept the flashlight down the stairs, but they disappeared into darkness after just a few turns. I called out, "Hello? Is someone injured down there?" But only my echo came back, bouncing off the steel structure. I backed into the cabin, locked the door, and logged it. 0107 hours, boot prints to door, no departure trail, blood evidence on staircase, possible injured party in vicinity. We'll conduct ground search at first light, but I knew I wouldn't find anything, because whatever had made those prints, whatever had spoken to me in my own voice, wasn't human, couldn't be human. I sat at the desk the rest of the night, revolver within reach, watching the door. Morning came eventually. The radio check-in was normal. Dispatch asked about weather conditions. I gave them the readings. They confirmed the next supply drop would be in 8 days. I didn't mention the voice or the blood. What would I say? That something using my voice tried to get me to open the door? They'd think the isolation was getting to me. They'd pull me out, mark my file, and I'd never get another solo assignment. When there was enough light, I geared up and went down to investigate. The boot prints were still there on the catwalk, though they'd been partially filled in by fresh snow overnight. The blood smear on the stairs was more pronounced in daylight. Definitely blood, dark and frozen solid now. I followed the stairs down, checking every landing, but there was nothing. No injured person, no animal, no explanation. The prints simply ended at my door. I spent an hour searching the base of the tower and the immediate area. The snow around the tower legs was deep and undisturbed, except for some old moose tracks. No human tracks leading to or from the tower. Whoever or whatever had climbed those stairs hadn't left a trail. I climbed back up and spent the day trying to rationalize it. Arctic foxes could supposedly mimic sounds. I'd read that somewhere. Maybe they could mimic human voices. And the boot prints could have been my own from earlier. I'd been up and down the stairs several times that first week. The blood could have been from a bird striking the stairs or a small mammal caught by a predator. But none of those explanations satisfied the cold certainty in my gut that something was very, very wrong. Night 7. I was ready this time. I'd barricaded the door with my supply totes, creating a secondary barrier behind the steel. The revolver was loaded and sitting on the desk next to me. I'd even rigged up a spare flashlight to shine directly at the door, so if it opened, I'd see immediately. 12:07 a.m. arrived like clockwork, and so did the knocking. Thump, thump, thump. Then the voice, "Riley, come on, this isn't funny anymore, let me in." My voice. But there was an edge to it now, a frustration that I recognized from my own bad days. "Riley, I know you're in there. I can hear you breathing." I hadn't made a sound. I was sitting perfectly still, holding my breath now. "Count with me," the voice said, and my blood ran cold. 1, 2, 3. It was starting the count, without me, as if it knew the rule. 4, 5, 6. I didn't join in. I sat frozen, listening to my own voice count to 10 on the other side of the door. 7, 8, 9, 10. Silence. Then, "Your turn, Riley. Count to 10. Then you can open the door and we can both get warm." I stood up slowly, picking up the revolver. "Who are you?" "You know who I am." The voice was patient now, almost gentle. "I'm you, Riley. The part of you that's out here in the cold. Don't you want to let yourself back in?" "That doesn't make any sense, doesn't it?" A pause. "Count to 10, Riley. You know the rule. After midnight, we never open the door before counting to 10, so count, I'm waiting." "No." "No?" The voice changed then, losing its warmth. It was still my voice, but colder, harder. "That's not how the rule works, Riley. You have to count. You have to count to 10 before you open the door. So count." "I'm not opening the door." "Then I'll count for you. 1, 2, 3. And then something impossible happened. A second voice joined in. Also mine. 2 versions of my voice in perfect synchronization. 4, 5, 6. I backed away from the door, nearly tripping over the supply totes. 7, 8, 9. On 9, I saw movement through the small window in the door. A shadow, tall and elongated, passing across the catwalk. And then another shadow moving in the opposite direction. 2 shapes, circling. 10. Silence. The propane heater hissed. The wind howled. I stood there for what felt like an eternity, revolver raised, watching the door. Nothing happened. The shadows didn't return. No more knocking, no more voices. But when I finally worked up the courage to look through the window, I saw something that made my hands shake so badly I almost dropped the flashlight. Footprints. Dozens of them, circling the entire catwalk. All the same boot print, all the same size, all leading clockwise around the cabin in an endless loop. And in the fresh snow on the catwalk, between some of the prints were drag marks, long gouges as if something heavy had been pulled along the grating. I didn't sleep at all that night. I sat in the chair with my back to the wall, where I could see both the door and all the windows, revolver in my lap, waiting for dawn. The morning radio check-in came and went. I kept my voice steady, professional. No, nothing unusual to report. Weather conditions normal. All systems functional. After I signed off, I sat staring at the radio for a long time. I should call back, I should report this, request an emergency extraction. But what would I tell them? And what would they find when they came? Just footprints in the snow and a ranger who couldn't handle isolation. I made a decision then. One more night. If it happened again, I'd report it and request transfer. But I needed to understand what was happening first. I needed to be sure I wasn't losing my mind. I spent the day documenting everything in my personal journal, not the official log, but my own private record. I wrote down every detail I could remember, the exact time of each incident, the precise words spoken, the pattern of the footprints. I took photographs with my digital camera, though I doubted they'd show much more than snow and shadows, and I reread Jenkins' instruction over and over. After midnight, we never opened the door before counting to 10. The emphasis wasn't on the opening, it was on the counting. We count to 10, not 7, not 12, exactly 10. Why 10? I thought about the footprints circling the catwalk. I thought about the two voices counting together. And I thought about that blood smear on the stairs, frozen and dark. 10 fingers on human hands. Was that it? Was the counting about fingers? Making sure whoever or whatever was at the door had 10 fingers. But that seemed absurd. How would counting help you determine that? Unless the thing outside was missing a finger, and the counting was a way to make it reveal itself somehow. Or maybe the counting was a delay tactic, giving whatever was out there time to move away if it wasn't human. I was grasping at straws, trying to find logic in something that defied logic. Night 8 arrived too quickly. I'd reinforced my barricade, adding the desk chair and some spare equipment. The revolver was loaded with 6 rounds, and I'd dug out the flare gun from the emergency supplies. Another 6 shots if I needed them. 12:07 a.m., like clockwork. But this time, there was no knocking. Instead, there was a voice, soft and close, as if the speaker had their mouth pressed against the door crack. "Riley, I know you're scared, I understand, but you need to let me in now." My voice, but wrong somehow. The pitch was right, the tone was right, but there was something underneath it, a resonance that didn't match human vocal cords. "I've been patient with you, Riley. 3 nights I've waited. 3 nights I've followed the rules, counted to 10, done everything right. But you won't open the door." I said nothing, watching the door through the flashlight beam. "Do you know what I am, Riley? Do you understand what's happening?" "No," I whispered. Then louder. "No, I don't. I'm what's left when the counting stops. I'm what happens when you don't finish, when you don't make it to 10. That doesn't make sense, doesn't it?" A pause, and I heard something. A scraping sound, like nails on steel. "Count to 10, Riley. Count to 10 right now and I'll show you." "I'm not counting." "Then I'll do it for you." 1. The scraping sound grew louder, more insistent. Something was dragging claws. They had to be claws, across the steel door, carving grooves in the metal. 2, 3, 4. The door shuddered, not from wind, from impact. 5, 6, 7. The scraping stopped. Silence. Then a new sound. Breathing. Heavy, wet breathing, coming from right outside the door. Close enough that I could hear it clearly even through the steel. 8, 9. The breathing stopped. Total silence. Even the wind seemed to die away. I stared at the door, revolver raised, waiting for 10. But it never came. Instead, I heard something that made my blood freeze. Laughter. My own laughter, but distorted, stretched like an audio recording played at the wrong speed. Almost, Riley. Almost got to 10. But not quite. Never quite 10. That's the secret, you see. That's why the rule works. Because I can't get to 10. Not by myself. I need you to count with me. The door shuddered again, and this time I saw the steel actually bend inward slightly where the deadbolts held it. So count with me, Riley. Let's count together. One last time. And then you can open the door. Don't you want to open the door? Don't you want to see what I look like? No. No, but I look just like you, exactly like you. I've been studying you, Riley, learning you. Your voice, your walk, your thoughts. I know that you called your mother before you took this assignment, and you told her you'd be fine. I know that you're afraid of dying alone like your uncle did in that fire in Fairbanks. I know that you count your steps when you climb the stairs, always 112 from the ground to the cabin door. That last detail made me gasp. I did count my steps, unconsciously, but I'd never told anyone. It was just a nervous habit, something I did without thinking. How do you... Because I'm you, Riley. I'm the you that stayed outside, the you that didn't count to 10, the you that got left behind. That's not possible, isn't it? The voice was almost sad now. Count to 10, Riley. Please. I'm so cold out here. And there's something in the forest, something hunting. I can hear it moving through the trees. It's getting closer. Please, Riley, count to 10 and let me back in before it finds me. I heard it then, a sound from far below, down in the forest. A howl, but not like any wolf I'd ever heard. It was deeper, resonant, and it seemed to vibrate through the tower's steel frame. Riley, please, count to 10. I'm begging you. The howl came again, closer this time. And I heard something else. The sound of something large moving through the snow below the tower. Branches snapping, the creak of frozen wood giving way. Riley, it's coming up the stairs. Count to 10. Now. I stood there, torn. What if it was telling the truth? What if there was something out there, something worse than whatever was speaking to me? But then I remembered the footprints, the circles, the blood, the way my voice had split into two different speakers. No, I said firmly. I'm not counting, and I'm not opening the door. A scream, my own voice screaming in terror and pain, so realistic that I almost lunged for the door. But I forced myself to stay still, to remember that this thing was a liar, a manipulator. The scream cut off abruptly, then silence. The howling from below stopped. The sounds of movement ceased. The tower was completely quiet except for my own ragged breathing and the hammering of my heart. I stayed frozen like that until dawn, revolver raised, watching the door. When light finally came, I worked up the courage to look through the window. The catwalk was empty, but carved into the steel door, right at eye level, were 9 parallel gouges. Deep grooves where something with claws had scored the metal. 9, not 10. I counted them 3 times to be sure. 9 gouges, evenly spaced, like fingers with claws. But one was missing. The space where a 10th gouge should be was clean, unmarked steel. I logged it in my official record as damage from overnight weather conditions, possible ice impact. But in my personal journal, I wrote the truth. The thing outside has 9 fingers. That's why it can't count to 10. That's why the rule works. It gets stuck at 9. During the morning check-in, Jenkins's voice crackled through the radio with the routine weather coordination. At the end he added, "Carter, you still following that rule I gave you?" "Yes, sir, every time." "Good, real good. You doing okay otherwise?" I hesitated. "Yeah, I'm fine." "You sure? Because if you need to tap out early, no shame in that. Tower 17's not for everyone." "I'm sure." But I wasn't sure. I wasn't sure of anything anymore except that I had 6 more days until the supply drop, and I had to survive 6 more nights. The moment my own voice said, "Commencing final count" over the radio, something in the tower changed. It wasn't the door or the wind or the temperature. Those stayed the same. Steel humming, storm pounding, frost thick on the glass. What changed was inside my chest. The fear that had been pacing in circles for days suddenly sat down and stared straight ahead. If this thing wanted to finish the count with me, the easiest way to fight it might be to give it something it didn't expect. 2, my voice on the radio said. I didn't say anything. I stood in the middle of the cabin, shotgun in one hand, flashlight in the other, listening. 3, 4, 5. Outside I could hear it now. Bare boots, or something like boots, adjusting position on the catwalk, weight shifting against the grating. The sound came through the door like vibration more than noise. It was right there, not circling, not at the stairs, pressed flat against the other side of the steel. 6, 7, 8, 9. The radio fell silent on 9. So did everything else. The storm was still there, howling around the tower, but it suddenly felt far away. Muted. The cabin became its own pocket of air, tight and cold and waiting. All it needed was one word, one syllable. 10. My tongue tried to form it on reflex. The rule Jenkins had drilled into me, the rule every tower ranger had apparently carried for years, itched in my throat. We never opened the door before counting to 10. Not 9. Not 11. 10. Something about that now felt wrong. You can say it, the voice outside whispered. Mine, but not mine. You've said it your whole life. 10 fingers, 10 steps, 10 little rangers jumping off the line. It's not a scary number, Riley. It's just the end. I took a step closer to the door. The steel was cold enough that frost hazed the inside around the edges. I could see the faint outline of the 9 gouges from the other side, like scars lit from within. In the center, at face level, where a 10th mark should have been, the metal was smooth, empty. You're stuck, I said. There was a pause, then a soft chuckle that made my skin crawl. I'm patient, it corrected. You're the one stuck. Up here, alone, no one coming for days, storm closing in, gravity under all that steel, heart in your throat, hand on a handle you can't touch without saying just one more number. It wasn't wrong. Why 9? I asked. Silence. Not because it didn't know. Because it wanted me to fill it. My mind went to the gouges in the steel, the barefoot prints that looked wrong, the way every log, mine, the old 2009 Rangers, stopped right before the pattern shifted. 9 knocks, 9 scratches, 9 finger marks. What happened to 10? I pushed. The voice on the other side shifted from amused to something closer to curious. It left, it said simply, a long time ago. That was such an insane sentence my brain almost skipped it. What does that even mean? You think numbers are yours, it went on, ignoring the question. Humans, rangers, counting deer, counting days, counting steps to the outhouse. You think you invented the way things end. Nails tapped lightly on the steel in a little rhythm. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, then stopped dead, where 10 should have been. You didn't, it said. You just learned to stand in one place in the pattern and pretend everything revolves around you. The radio crackled on the desk behind me. For a second I heard other voices layered under my own. Jenkins. A woman I didn't recognize. A younger man. We never opened the door before. You're not the first one to... Day 11. Storm still raging. 0-1-0-7. Snatches of past logs, shredded and replayed out of order. The tower's memory, or mine, or something in between. I've been here a long time, the thing said quietly. At first, all I had was 3. 3 knocks, 3 beats. That's all the first ones knew how to count. Then someone gave me 4. Then 5, then 6. It took a war in the south to give me 7. Took a tower like this to give me 8. 9? I asked, before I could stop myself. 9 was a gift, it said. From a man who didn't make it down the stairs. You've been walking in his footprints all week. My stomach turned. I saw the spiral notebook again in my mind, that last scratched line. It finally learned to... 10, it said, almost reverent. 10 is special. 10 gets to leave. 10 gets to step outside the circle. 10 gets to stop coming back to the door. My hand tightened on the shotgun. You're trying to make me 10, I realized. I'm trying to let you go, it corrected. You think this is about getting in, you're wrong. This place eats people, Riley. Mountains, forest, ice, towers. You think you're standing guard. You're just one more nail in the frame. Its breath hit the other side of the steel, hot enough that frost melted in a tiny circle right where my head would be if I leaned in. Say it, it whispered. Give it to me. Give me 10. You walk away. I get to be whole. We both win. It was insane. It was predatory. But buried inside the manipulation was something like truth. Whatever this thing was, it wasn't a ghost of one person. It was a collection of habits, of rules, of people who had stood where I was standing now and followed instructions they didn't understand. That's what made it strong. It didn't matter if you believed in it. It mattered that you did what it wanted. I stepped back from the door. No. The steel vibrated with a growl low enough that I felt it in my spine. You don't even understand the rule you're breaking, it said. You think counting is for me. You hijacked it, I shot back. But someone wrote it for us. For you, it agreed. To keep you in your place. I glanced at the radar console, at the weather reports, at the neat stacks of official logbooks, all the ways the tower taught you to measure things: wind speed, humidity, visibility, time. We counted fires to put them out. We counted days to get through a rotation. We counted to 10 before opening the door. Every single one of those counts assumed that if you did it correctly, something on the other side would behave. I'm done counting for you, I said. Then who are you counting for? It asked. For a second I didn't have an answer. Then quietly, me. The storm didn't let up. If anything, it got worse. By the next afternoon, gusts were slamming into the tower hard enough that the whole structure shuddered on its legs. The sky was a solid wall of white. I couldn't see 10 yards beyond the windows. Dispatch still answered the morning check-in. The pilot still promised a window as soon as we can get a bird in the air. But their voices sounded farther away now, washed out by distance and static and the constant white roar. Tower 17, maintain position and keep the line clear, dispatch said. We'll call as soon as we have an update. Copy, I answered. I didn't tell them about the thing at the door starting its final count. I didn't tell them that I'd stopped finishing the rule. That afternoon I tested a theory. I turned every clock in the cabin face down. The wall clock, the wristwatch, the tiny digital one on the cooking timer. I unplugged the radar console's display and turned off the weather alert beeps. For the first time since I'd arrived, there was no digital or analog reminder of what time it was. The only measure I had of the world was the amount of coffee left, the ache in my legs, and the way the light outside shifted from grey to darker grey. It didn't change the fact that 00.07 was coming. But when the moment arrived, it hit different. I was sitting on the floor with my back against the far wall, shotgun propped between my knees, when the first knock came. I hadn't been watching the clock. I felt it instead. The entire tower snapped like a plucked string. A pressure wave moved through the walls, the floor, up my spine and into my teeth. The mug in the sink rattled. A pen rolled off the desk and hit the floor with a tiny, stupid sound. Then the voice. "Don't need the numbers anymore, Riley," it called. My own inflection, roughened by something beneath it. "You've been keeping perfect time for me." No cheerful knock this time, no playful rhythm, just that heavy, patient weight against the steel. "What did you do with them?" I asked. "Them who?" "The others," I said. "All those footprints, all those voices, the ranger from 2009, Jenkins, the ones who gave you 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. It considered that for a second. "Same thing I'm offering you," it said. "A way out of the weather. A way to stop standing in one place waiting for something that isn't coming." "Helicopter's coming," I said. "You believe that?" I almost said yes. Instead, I pictured the chopper trying to cut through this soup of white, rotors icing over, instruments lying. I pictured some pilot making a call between turning back or risking 2 more bodies in the trees. "I don't know," I admitted. "That's honest," it said, sounding pleased. "You don't know if help is coming. You don't know what I am. You don't know why the rule works. You don't know why I can't say 10. The 9 fingers shifted, dragging across metal with a dull scrape. "But you do know this," it continued. "You know what happens when people in places like this get tired. You've seen it. Frozen in the wrong jacket, lost off trail, found in spring with eyes chewed out. Your job has always been the same. Count them, tag them, put them in the log." It smiled through the steel. I could hear it. "You're just adding yourself now." I should have been more scared than I was. Instead, what I felt was something closer to anger. Not righteous anger, not heroic anger, just fed up. "You want me to believe I was always going to die here," I said. "That this tower is a mouth and I'm just the next bite. Why else would they pay you extra to be alone?" it asked. "You think they don't know what this place does?" Then why the rule? I shot back. If they wanted me to fail, why give me a way to stall you? It didn't answer. Maybe it's not for you, I said. Maybe the rule was never for whatever stood outside the door. Maybe it was a test, yes, but not one I'd thought it was. Not, can you follow instructions under pressure? Something simpler. Can you delay? Can you refuse? Can you do something other than completing the pattern the way it's handed to you? I'm not going to be your 10, I said. If I walk down those stairs, I'm walking on my own feet, not yours. You still think you get to choose, it said quietly. That's almost sweet. The fingers left the door. For the first time ever, I heard them move sideways. The sound traveled to the right, across the wall, then down. Not footsteps, not exactly. More like the scrape of weight dragging across the skin of the tower, hand over hand, feeling for seams. It wasn't coming through the door. It was looking for another way in. My mistake had been assuming the rule covered everything. It covered one entry point, the door. The windows were reinforced. The floor hatch had an interior bolt. The ceiling was just plywood and insulation under a thin sheet of metal. The first slam hit directly above my head. The whole ceiling bowed down an inch. Dust rained from the seams. The light fixture jerked in its mount. I rolled out of the way on instinct, grabbing the shotgun, heart hammering in a way it hadn't even during the earlier nights. It had stopped asking permission. It was done with the game. The second impact shook loose a strip of wood trim. It fell and bounced off the desk, scattering papers. A third blow, this one scraping along the roof, made a sound like an animal pacing in circles overhead. It understood the tower now, knew the dimensions, knew the weak spots. After midnight, we never opened the door before counting to 10. It mocked, the words warped with static overhead. But we never said anything about the roof, did we? A line of frost traced itself along one ceiling seam as I watched, spreading like a crack in glass. There was nowhere else to go, no interior room, no basement, just one square of light, one steel door, 4 windows, and a thin skin between me and whatever was crawling over the tower like a second skeleton. For a second, the urge to just open the door and run was overwhelming. Run where? Into the trees, into whiteout, into a forest that thing clearly knew better than I ever would. Instead, I backed into the corner where I could see both the door and the ceiling. The shotgun felt useless. What was a slug going to do to something that moved like pressure and rules? Riley, it said again, from everywhere at once now. Door, roof, floor, radio. You can end this any time. Just say it. Give me 10. Stop fighting gravity. There's a kind of tired that lives in your bones, not your muscles. The kind you get after holding a weight too long. That's what I had now. The weight wasn't the tower. It wasn't the storm. It was the number. 10. Always hanging there, just out of reach. Always waiting. I thought of the Rangers before me, of the 2009 guy scribbling 9 strokes in the margins of his logbook, of whoever gave this thing 4, 5, 6. Of Jenkins, telling me the rule in that gravel voice like he was passing along bad news in the only way he knew how. Maybe one of them had given in. Maybe that's where 9 had come from. Maybe the only thing keeping 10 out of this tower was the collective, stubborn decision of a long line of tired people to choke on the word before it could come out. Maybe that was the only thing I could add to this story. Not a victory, just one more refusal. I sat down on the floor. I put the shotgun across my knees. I closed my eyes. I'm not counting anymore, I said, not for you. The noise on the roof intensified. For a second I thought it was going to come straight through, burst into the cabin in a shower of splinters and frost and teeth. It didn't. Instead it moved. Down the wall, along the legs, out, into the storm. Not gone, not beaten, just redirected. The pressure against the tower lessened. The steel's hum changed pitch, going back to the familiar wind song I'd heard the first quiet nights. The radio hissed softly. No voice came through. The door stayed exactly where it was. Closed. The rest of the night passed in a kind of grey daze. I stayed awake until there was light. Not because I expected another attack, but because the idea of closing my eyes and dreaming numbers made my skin crawl. When the sky finally shifted from black to dull white, I laughed once, quietly, at how stupid and small this all looked in daylight. Then the helicopter called in. Tower 17, this is Air Unit 1. Carter, you still breathing up there? I grabbed the mic, my hand stiff. Tower 17 copy. I'm here. Got you a narrow window, kid, Hank said. Storm's got one more punch left in it, but we can ride the gap. You ready? I looked at the door one last time. At the 9 gouges. At my handprint in the frost where I'd pressed my palm. At the empty space where a 10th mark might have gone. Yes, I said. I'm ready. As I packed fast, ID, journal, the old notebook, nothing else, I realized something simple and stupid. I didn't know if anything I'd done had mattered. Maybe it would have left anyway, maybe it would have followed me, maybe it would wait for the next ranger and start over back at 3 knocks. But if the only thing I got to choose in this whole mess was whether I gave it 10 or not, then that choice was enough. I wasn't a hero, I wasn't a victim. I was just one more park ranger in a line of people who, for reasons no one would ever put in an official report, refused to finish a count. When I stepped onto the catwalk for the last time, wind whipping the hood off my head, I checked the snow. The footprints were there, faint now under fresh powder. My boots, other boots. Bare prints with wrong toes. All of them pressed toward the door like a diagram of bad ideas. None of them led away from the tower. Until I put my foot down. One step, then another, down the stairs, into the rotor wash, into the harness, up, into the noise, leaving 9 gouges and an unfinished rule behind. From the air, Tower 17 looked harmless, just a stick of rusted steel poking up through the trees, a toy box on a pole, no 9-finger marks on the door from this distance, no footprints circling like a ritual, no voice pressed against the metal trying to talk you into letting go. You look like hell, Carter, Hank shouted over the rotor noise as we banked away. Storm chewing you up that bad? Something like that, I answered. He couldn't hear the difference in my tone over the headset. I could. Back in Juneau, the process was predictable, medical, psychological, bureaucratic. A nurse took my vitals and frowned at my blood pressure. A doctor shone a light in my eyes and asked how long I'd been having trouble sleeping. A psychologist with kind eyes and a well-practiced, concerned expression asked me to walk him through what happened up there. I gave them a version that fit their forms. Auditory phenomena, possible visual misperceptions, high stress, recent bereavement, environmental isolation, nightly knocks, a sense of presence at the door, my own voice on the radio. I know how it sounds, I said. I'm not saying it was real in any way you could measure. I'm saying that's what it felt like. The psychologist nodded thoughtfully. Do you believe it was something external? He asked. Something paranormal? I thought of the notebooks, the 9 strokes in the margins, the way the rule had passed down from ranger to ranger like a bad heirloom, the gouges in the steel. I believe we all followed the same rule, I said, and it did something to us. He wrote that down. Would you be willing to return to a winter tower assignment next season? He asked eventually. No, I said, with more certainty than anything else I'd said all day. Is that because of what you experienced? Yes, I answered, and because I listened to the rule, and I don't like what it made me almost do. He stared at me for a moment, then smiled in that professional, distant way. We can reassign you to summer posts, he said. Trails, campgrounds, maybe training. No shame in that, Carter. Not everyone is suited for long-term isolation. That's the official story, I asked. That's the true story, he said. Maybe it was, from where he sat. From where I sat, the truth was messier. Weeks passed. I moved back to Anchorage, took a temporary assignment at a visitor center of all places, answered questions from tourists about bears and moose and the northern lights, watched kids press their faces to the glass display of old ranger uniforms and badges like it was some kind of superhero exhibit. Sometimes, late in the afternoon, when the winter light went thin and gray, I caught myself staring at the automated weather station display on the wall. Temperature, wind speed, humidity, visibility, all the numbers we use to make ourselves believe we understand what's outside. Never once did that display show 00.07. The only place that time showed up was in my dreams. I'd wake at 12:06, heart racing, convinced I could hear knocks in the hallway, my own voice down at the front door of my apartment asking to be let in. I'd lie there and count the seconds in my head, refusing to look at the clock. 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, stop, never 10. One night, after one of those wake-ups, I gave in and grabbed my notebook. Not the park-issued log, my own. I wrote in block letters across a fresh page, "Rule. After midnight, we never open the door before counting to 10. Correction. After midnight, we never open the door for anyone who needs us to." It wasn't poetry, it wasn't even good writing, but it felt like taking a splinter out of my foot. A month after I left Tower 17, I got a message from Jenkins, not through official channels, through a number I didn't recognize, late at night. When I answered, all I heard at first was his breathing, then the distant creak of old wood. "You made it down," he said finally. "You knew I did," I replied. "You heard the traffic. Dispatch tells you what dispatch wants you to hear," he said. "I wanted to hear it from you." "I'm here," I said, "off the tower, off the winter rotation, sitting behind a desk next to a gift shop." He grunted something that might have been a laugh. "Could be worse," he said. "You could still be up there, counting." I hesitated. Then, "How many winters did you do in towers?" "Enough to know how that rule feels when you've said it too many times," he replied. "You ever break it?" I asked. "Thought about it," he said. "Heard my own voice on the wrong side of the door more than once. Heard things that knew too much about me, same as you." "What did you do?" "What you did," he said simply. "Lived to complain about it." It wasn't the answer I'd wanted. I'd hoped he'd tell me some secret, some extra line of the rule that clarified everything. Instead, all he gave me was solidarity. "Tower 17 always did run hot," he added after a pause, "even before my time. My mentor told me the rule. I told you, you'll tell someone if you stay in long enough. That's how these things work." "I'm not going back," I said. "Good," he replied. "Maybe that's how you break it." "Break what?" "The expectation," he said. "That someone will always be there to stand in that box and play along." "Someone will," I said quietly. "You know they will. They'll assign another rookie. They'll give him the speech. He'll follow the rule because it's all he knows." "Maybe," Jenkins said. "Or maybe he'll be different because you were." It sounded like wishful thinking. But then he said something that stuck with me. "You changed the story a little, Carter," he said. "Most of us added numbers. You took one away." "0, I said. "Yeah," he replied. "You gave it a nothing it doesn't know what to do with." The line crackled. For a split second, the static rose, and in it, I could have sworn I heard something else breathing along the wires. "Hang up, kid," Jenkins said suddenly, voice going flat. "Storm's coming in on my end. Don't want to share this line with anything I didn't call." "Stay safe," I said. "You too. And remember—" He stopped himself. I could hear the weight of habit in the silence. "Just remember," he finished and hung up. He didn't repeat the rule, neither did I. You're probably expecting some big revelation, that I went back up to Tower 17 years later and found the door smooth, the gouges gone, or that someone sent me a picture from a new Rangers log with 10 strokes in the margin instead of 9, or that I woke up one night with all 10 fingers gone and finally understood what it had wanted. None of that happened. What happened was quieter. Spring came. The snow melted off the lowlands. Tourists flooded the parks. I taught kids how to read bear tracks and adults how to stay on marked trails. I memorized 100 different ways to answer, "Are there wolves here?" without scaring anyone. Sometimes, in the middle of a talk about avalanche safety, my tongue would almost slip and say, "After midnight, we never open." I never finished that sentence. I erased it from my mouth the way I'd tried to erase 10 from the count. Tower 17 got reassigned to another ranger the next winter. I know because I saw the posting go up in the internal system. New name, new schedule, same coordinates. I didn't message him. I didn't call. I didn't want my voice anywhere near that tower again, even as an echo. But I did one thing. In the comments field of the internal posting, where you can leave notes about road conditions, supply issues, quirks of the location, I typed a single line. "Floodlight over door is out. Recommend replacement before first snow." It was small, stupid, mundane, but when I pictured some kid stepping out on that catwalk in the dark for his first rotation, I liked the idea that he'd at least be able to see the door clearly, see the gouges, see his own footprints, see that he had a choice. If you're hearing this as an emergency alert on some channel or podcast, you're probably waiting for the part where I tell you not to go to Alaska, or not to take a job in a fire tower, or not to trust your own voice when you hear it in the wrong place. I won't. Alaska is what it is. Towers are what they are. Voices do what they do. What I will tell you is this. Rules are stories we tell ourselves to feel safer in the dark. Some of them help. Seatbelts, fire breaks. Don't feed the bears. Some of them just teach you how to cooperate with things that don't have your best interests in mind. After midnight, we never open the door before counting to 10. If you ever find yourself somewhere high and alone and cold, with something on the other side of the steel that sounds like you and knows too much, you don't owe it 10. You don't owe it anything. Start at 0 if you have to. Stop at 9. And remember, not finishing the count is still a choice. Sometimes it's the only one that keeps the door closed.